All right, good evening, dear students. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Thank you for being so early. I am, very happy to be with you because today we are going to be having a very good excursus on a new task in the speaking section. You know that the last 2 days, the last two classes, we have been practicing for the second one. It's been very didactic. We have had a lot of fun actually. But now we're going to move on to the third one. And while we continue, you're actually going to discover that the third one, the third task of the speaking section, is super similar to the second one. And there is actually just a little change, a little slide of hands, you know what I mean? But it's going to, I would say, basically it's going to be the same. But well, nevertheless, of course, there are some other tricks and some other recommendations I have for you. Okay, so without having anything else to say, let's begin then because we have a very good time ahead of us. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen with you, and I am going to let you see this presentation, and we're going to continue. Okay, wonderful. So as you can see here, we have, as I was saying, the third task of the speaking section. And in this case, well, this is actually an integrated speaking task because, well, it is going to continue presenting you the difficulty of having to combine many of your skills in order to prepare your response and to deliver it, okay? That is the reason why this is an integrated speaking task. It's not something different from the last one in that sense, okay? Um, as you can see here, I still have the picture of a journalist, and I hope that indicates you right from the beginning that in this task, you don't have to give your opinion too, okay? I just wanted to paraphrase my excursus by saying that because, well, you know that it's very important for you to remind that the only moment in this section in which you are required to actually give your opinion and to state what you think about the topics you receive is in the first task. In the other ones, because they are integrated speaking tasks, you don't have to do so, okay? You simply have to be like a journalist. Receive, take notes, summarize, and deliver. No more than that, okay? So please remind that and keep it on mind while we continue. Okay, so first of all, the third task will deal with academics. Okay, we're returning, we're coming back to academics, just like many questions and tasks in these sections of the TOEFL test planner. Okay, this is not something new. You will be reading a short passage that is 80 to 100 words long, and it will be discussing an academic topic. This is actually the only difference between this task and the second task. Remind that in the second task, moving back, what you had to do is, as in the third task, first of all, receive a passage, read it, and later you had to listen to a audio item. In this case, in the second task, everything was about university situations, right? Something like changes in the bus service, something like as we were practicing yesterday, something like changes in the buildings, changes in the classes, in the materials, and stuff like that. But nevertheless, the difference in this case and what differentiates the third task with the second task is that in the third task, you are going to receive materials, first of all, a written passage and later a audio item. But these materials are not going to be about university settings, are not going to be about university experiences. These materials are going to be about academic subjects. That is to say, you are possibly going to receive something about, I don't know, social sciences, natural sciences, something like biology, chemistry. In social sciences, you could receive something like politics. You could receive something like arts. Any single academic topic, it's a possibility here. Okay, so it's plausible you're going to receive a written passage about geology, laws, whatever. Okay, but it's going to be an academic topic, not a university experience anymore. We're just getting rid of it. Okay, so after you have read that passage that is about an academic subject, as I say, it's super varied. It can be about whatever, but it is going to be academic. You're going to receive a lecture. Okay, a lecturer will be giving you a few examples that complement the topic of the passage you just read. And you will be required to give, again, a short talk that summarizes the items. Okay, here is how the timing works. Okay, so as you can see, basically, you're going to have after you have read that passage, that is going to be super short again. It's going to be no more than 100 words. After you have read that passage on an academic topic, you're going to receive a lecture this time. It is not going to be a conversation anymore, but a lecture, okay? That is to say, a professor delivering a class, and you're going to listen to what that professor is saying, and the discourses, excuse me, the speech or the excursus that he's always going to be delivering is going to be related to what? To the passage that you just read, okay? For example, if the passage talked about biology, then the professor is going to be talking about biology. And specifically, imagine that biology passage was about evolution. Then the professor is going to be talking about evolution, okay? It is not going to be something different. But as I say, and as I have written here, the topic of the lecture is going to complement, okay? It's going to complement the passage. It's not going to be about something different, okay? So have that in mind. This is the timing. It's actually exactly the very same timing you're going to, well, you are already used to, because it is the one that we have been practicing yesterday. You are going to have 4 or 5 seconds to read the passage of 100 words approximately. You're going to have 1 minute in order to listen to that conversation, because it's 1 minute long. Well, about that, something like that, right? It's about one minute. And also you're going to have 30 seconds to prepare your response, and you're going to have 60 seconds to deliver that response. Exactly the same. As you can see, the only difference here, again, it's that in this case, you're not going to receive materials about university experiences. This is going to be about academic topics. This is going to be about science, art, I don't know, technology, okay? Nothing related to experiences, but academic subjects, okay? The only difference, okay? So, of course, we are going to understand this way better if we practice it. So let's get into the first example I have prepared for you. As it was the case when we were beginning the second task, I have prepared some examples of my own, and we're going to avail from this. We're going to avail from these materials in order to get the examples. Okay, so as you can see here, there is a passage. As you can see, it's now related to biology. It's not about a university experience. So I'm gonna also paste it here in the chat box. Maybe once you read it more, you know, with bigger letters, it's okay. You can do it. But let's read together, okay? We're just practicing and just trying to show you how this works. So for example, the passage will be something like this. What is mitosis? In biology, the process called mitosis is a part of the cell cycle in which chromosomes are replicated and separated into 2 nuclei. This is a process that only occurs in certain types of cells called eukaryotic cells. Most animals undergo this type of mitosis, although the process can vary between one animal and the next. Errors sometimes occur during this process, which is how many forms of cancer come to be. These are typically caused by having too few or too many chromosomes in the duplicated cells. Some organisms also use mitosis as a form of reproduction. Okay, so as you can see, this is a passage that is going to be super similar to the one you're going to receive on that actual exam day. Now, after you have read this, you're going to receive the instructor saying, well, now you're going to listen to a lecture on the same topic, and you will listen to something like this. Listen with me.
Now listen to a lecture.
You're able to listen, right? Could somebody confirm me that?
On the same topic.
Do you listen?
Yes, teacher.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. So let's please listen to this lecture on the same topic, mitosis.
Now listen to a lecture on the same topic.
Okay, so mitosis. Many of you might be wondering how this applies in the real world. Take the example of a cut on your finger. Why doesn't the cut stay open forever? Well, because the cells in your finger undergo mitosis. The body uses this process to repair damage and replace dead cells. It's not always a fast process. The cut on your hand will usually take several days to heal completely. The process of mitosis is at its most rapid when we're in our infancy. It has to be this way. Human beings grow rapidly during this time, so they need a lot of new cells to replace the ones which die and help the baby boy or girl to grow. Other animal species, such as the dog, undergo this process even more rapidly. Ever noticed how a puppy the size of your hand is the size of a small horse 18 months later? Well, the process which enables this rapid transition is mitosis too. Another and very different example of mitosis is that of bacteria. Most bacteria are asexual by nature, that is, they do not require a partner to reproduce. They use mitosis in order to churn out exact copies of themselves. Some bacteria, such as the one called Salmonella, can reproduce once every 20 minutes.
All right, wonderful. So as you can see, it is a lecture on the same topic, mitosis. And well, mitosis, as we can see, it's a very interesting topic. So let's listen to my response to this. So after you have received these two materials on the actual exam, you receive an instructor again saying, well, now begin to to prepare your response now. And there's going to be a beep. And after that beep, you are going to have your 30 seconds to prepare your response. You organize your notes, you organize whatever you have written down. And after that, there's going to be another instructor saying, now begin to deliver your response after the beep. And the beep sounds, and then you go on with your response. But let's listen to an example that I prepared for this specific materials, okay? So let's listen, please.
Okay, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of mitosis, which is a process by which eukaryotic cells are replicated and separated into two nuclei. On the other hand, in the listening passage, we observe some practical applications of this phenomenon in the real world. For example, when we have a cut in our fingers, the way that they heal, or the way that the cut heals, is by mitosis, and the cells are reparated and the damaged ones are simply eliminated, and that way we heal. This process is also very much efficient and rapid in our infancy because we need to grow up, and it is the same case for dogs because when they are puppies, they can grow up super fastly into a completely large animal. Also, it happens in some bacteria which are asexual and do not need partners to reproduce, as for example Salmonella.
All right, wonderful. So as you can see, that would be a response, very accurate one of how you should respond to this specific task on your actual exam. Okay, so now let's come back to our presentation and let's see some recommendations I have for you, and of course the structure again. So for example, recommendations for the third task. Okay, so for this section, you must be very general and concise while summarizing both materials you will receive. For those who got into recently, remind that in this case, you have to be like a journalist again, okay? So assume please the role of a journalist while you're responding to this specific question. Why? Because you are not required to give your opinion whatsoever. You don't have to say if you believe that mitosis is a productive or actually harmful process for human nature, or you don't have to add anything you know, okay? You don't have to complement with your own knowledge something about these specific materials you have received, even if you, for example, are a biologist, as a professional biologist. I mean, and if you know something additional, complementary to this lecture, you should not include it. You're not being required here to implement and to add any sort of information nor opinion in this response. You're just like a journalist, okay? You received the information, you take notes, and you deliver it, no more than that, okay? So for this section, you must be very, very general and concise while summarizing both materials you will receive. Nonetheless, as I said last time, if you're going to emphasize in one item, let it be in the listening item. If you pay attention to my response, I spent way more time talking about what the professor said in the lecture rather than commenting on what the reading passage said, because as I always comment with you, it's super easy just to write down whatever the reading passage said and to repeat exactly the same words. That is something that everybody could do. You don't need a very good level in English in order to do that. Nevertheless, if you're able to, with your own words, synthesize and summarize whatever this lecture said with the companion of the written passage, then you're going to demonstrate to your reviewer that you are actually very proficient in this language, okay? So spend more time summarizing the conversation, or in this case, the lecture you just listened to. It's going to be advantageous as well, this is another recommendation, if you prepare your response sheet in an interlude between the second task and the third one, with the outlines you'll follow. Remember, this is exactly what I told you last time. For example, imagine that Remind that on that day, you don't have to bring any type of sheet of paper with you to the test center, because the staff members from ETS are going to be the ones in charge of delivering to you every sort of material you're going to need in order to perform for this specific exam. All the sheets of papers, all of the pens, all of the pencils, maybe erasers, whatever you need, they are going to hand it over to you. Okay, so once you receive your papers there, and you are in the interlude between the second task and the third task, always try to, to begin writing down what the structure that you're going to use in order to respond to this specific question. What is going to be that structure? In this case, it is going to be this one. Please look at it. If you pay attention to my response, I begin by saying, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, and well, then obviously you continue saying whatever the topic of the reading passage was. And after you have finished, you say, likewise, in the listening passage, and then comes whatever the lecture is about, right? As I did. And you move on to say the first lecture's point and the second lecture's point. If you pay attention, the professor talked about a lot of things. She talked about how some applications of the real world for this phenomena are cuts in our fingers. She talked about how in infancy we are always with more predisposition to have this specific process in our body. How she talked about, for example, how puppies, how dogs, they also use this mitosis process because they grow up super fastly too into large animals. There were a lot of points in this lecture. So after you have stated super generally what the lecture is about, you move on to say the points this professor mentioned. Okay, that is your task here. You're just, as I say, summarizing. Okay, so please try to copy this into your notebooks. This is the structure you have to follow. And after you have, well, understood this structure, that is my recommendation, that in the interlude, that is to say, in the waiting time that you have from the second task to the third one, try to write down in a paper, or the papers are going to have that time, the structure. For example, as you can see here, in my sheet of response, in my response sheet, I wrote, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into 2 points or column in this case, and I let some blank space in order for me to fill it once I received the materials. I also wrote, I have also written likewise, comma, and I also let some blank space in order for me to fill it once I receive the material or the information contained in the lecture. Okay, so that is my recommendation. Always try to save time and to avail of it by making this a specific, I would say this is specific preparation for your responses, trying to write down the structure in your sheet of paper. Okay, so those are my recommendations. Okay, so now before we explain a little bit more of this, let's listen to another example I have prepared for you. So let's go to another website. And this website also is going to allow us to have another passage. First of all, a reading passage about an academic topic. This time it's going to be about psychology, I guess, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's about marketing, but I would say it's psychology too, but nevertheless, there you have. So let's read together, okay? This is compassionate consumerism. Compassionate consumerism, it says, is a relatively new trend in the American retail market. In this type of consumerism, when individuals make a purchase of a portion of the money they pay is allocated to a charitable cause. Nowadays, individuals often look for ways to contribute in the betterment of humanity, but they don't always have the financial resources to do so. Compassionate consumerism appears to be a good middle ground. While critics feel that it's only a marketing ploy aimed at appealing to people in their 20s and 30s, others applaud the effort. They argue that it is desirable for companies, to sacrifice profits in order to help those in need. Okay, so that would be, as you can see, the academic passage, because it is related, as I say, whether to marketing or psychology. Now, let's listen to a lecture given by a professor on the same topic.
Now, as the reading suggests, many companies have embraced the idea of compassionate consumerism over the past few years. Studies show that customers are generally supportive of such efforts, especially very young shoppers. Not only that, but companies make a lot of additional profits from this kind of compassionate marketing. Some companies even thrive off of it. Now, take ABC Shoes, for example. They're kind of like the pioneer of this type of consumerism. You know the shoes, right? Those flat, simple slip-on shoes which are based on a type of traditional Argentinian footwear called an alpargata. Anyway, ABC Shoes achieved a huge market share about 7 years ago with their one-for-one business model. Basically, if you buy a pair of ABC shoes, they donate another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. While this program has cost ABC Shoes a lot of money to administer, they've also made so much profit that they've expanded to include not only shoes, but also eyewear and coffee. Speaking of coffee, another famous company that has adopted the compassionate consumerism model is Bob's Coffee. Now, the one-for-one model doesn't make much sense for a cup of coffee, but a portion of the cost of certain items is sometimes donated to various nonprofit organizations. Since Bob's deals closely with coffee bean farmers in South America, they have recently launched a campaign where 10% of all purchases are donated to preserving the South American rainforest. And, would you believe it, on the day they announced the campaign, there was a line out the door at Bob's Coffee right here on campus.
All right, wonderful. I like the emphasis. There was a line on the door. Very good, right? Okay, so as you can see, it's a very interesting topic. And now please let's listen to a response I recorded about this specific material. Okay, so let's go. Please let's listen to how you should respond.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, which is a phenomenon that happens when people buy things knowing that a portion of their payment will be allocated to a charitable fund. Likewise, in the listening passage, we have seen a study that confirms that this practice and method is very much supported by young shoppers, and that it also promotes and helps enterprises to get additional profits. For example, ABC Shoes was a pioneer in this specific practice. They made some sort of shoes called alpargata. They had a one-for-one business model in which they received a purchase and they also gave away another shoes to a poor person. You also have Bob's Coffee, which basically receive a purchase and they donate one portion of that to an ONG. They are launching right now a campaign to help the South American rainforests.
Wonderful. Okay, so as you can see, in this case, the lecture was, well, containing a lot of information, okay, a lot of details. So I try to always, and this is a counsel as well too, when you have a lecture like this one that mentions a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of examples. I mean, because if you listen to this, first of all, it talked about how this is true, how this phenomena have become popular, how said that this somehow allows people to help poor persons and to serve to humanity. And later the professor always, she referred to some examples and companies that began utilizing this model, AVC, Bob's, and she later mentioned how, for example, this Bob's coffee company was somehow being in a partnership with South American producers of coffee. And because of that, they decided to now launch a campaign in order to help the South American forests. I mean, a lot of information, right? So try to always choose those specific topics and themes that is evident are the ones that have a lot of importance for the professor, because whenever the professor spends more time in a specific example or topic or theme, obviously she is maybe subconsciously transmitting to us that that is a important topic, right? That it is an important point. It is not a complementary nor contingent one. So when you have a lecture like this, try to always choose those ones in which the professor has to spend more time. For example, I didn't talk about that line, right? At the door of this Bob's Coffee, because it was something like a joke she wanted to make, something like a super curious mention that is not actually an important detail. And if I decide to include that specific point into my response, maybe I will be losing a lot of other important points, as for example, how she spent more time talking about the Bob's company or the Bob's Coffee company wants to launch a campaign in order to help the South American forests. I decided to talk about that and not about the line out of the door, because I noticed that was a contingent detail. It was not really important. Okay, so try to get rid of those not very important secondary details, because if you include everything, you're just not going to have time. Remember, this is a 1 minute in order to summarize two different materials, okay? And now we're talking about academic material. We're not with university experiences anymore, okay? So those are another recommendations I have for you. So let's look at the template one more time. As you can see, I always begin by saying, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of. I do this in order to make it vary a little bit with the other one. If you remind, in the second task I used to begin with in the reading passage, right? So in order to make it change a little bit, because in this case, your reviewer is going to listen to you to give a response for the second one, for the third task. Therefore, you should not repeat the structure or the template you use for the second and the third task. Okay, you should try to vary and change those structures for every single task, as we are doing right now. That's the reason why I began by saying, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, and I, as you were able to observe, I say, well, whatever the reading passage was about, right? In this case, I said, well, the reading passage is about consumerism, and how this compassionate consumerism, by some people, it's considered to be a matter of profit for companies, and other people consider it's some, you know, good and ethically correct manner to help people. I mentioned that, and I move on to say, well, the professor also mentions this and this. So those will be the lecture's point, right? First lecture's point, second lecture's point, etc. And it was exactly the same for my tosses when I began to talk about the examples the professor gave, everything she mentioned. Try to imply it, okay? Try to include it into the response too. All right. I want to set some time in order for you to make questions. Is there any question about everything we have discussed until this point, please? Maybe you want me to repeat something in Spanish. Tell me. I will gladly do it. Please. Any question? Any question? Any doubt? Any commentary to this point?
I have a question.
Mhm.
Approximately how much time we have to write our template between task 2 and 3?
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Very good question, actually. It's about, I mean, it's difficult to measure it because, well, of course, I don't have a chronometer, right, when we are in the actual exam. But nevertheless, and obviously, sometimes the time is derived from test center to test center. But nevertheless, the factual truth is that there is always a interlude between the second and the third task, and the third to the fourth. So I would say it's something like 10 seconds. Yeah, that would be my response to you, Bonnie. It's more or less 10 seconds. And I would say it's obviously sufficient for you to write just 2 lines, right? You have to say, well, to immerse, I mean, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into. You later move on to say, likewise, in the reading passage, or excuse me, the listening passage, and to just let some points, right, in order for you to have it organized. So it's not really so much time that you're gonna require for you to feel this, but yes, it's something like 10 seconds, something approximately to that specific number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So any other question, please, with regard to whatever we have said until this point? Any other question, please? This is the moment. Okay, I guess no questions. All right, wonderful. So what are we gonna do now? Of course, we're gonna practice, okay? This is a section for practicing. And of course, I have prepared, as it was the case yesterday, some examples. So as you can see right now on my screen, look at it. There's a passage, okay? Now, in this case, again, I'm going to need every single one of you to help me, okay? We're just going to begin with the practice. This is practical stuff. So every single one of you, please grab your piece of paper, grab your pen, be ready in order to take notes of this passage and also of the lecture. And after that, one of you is going to begin with the responses, and we're going to be one by one. You're going to wait for your turn. One by one is going to begin to deliberate a response about this specific topic that is Aboriginal people. Okay, so please be ready. I'm going to take your time in this case here with my cell phone. Remind you that you have 4 or 5 seconds to read this. And so please, if you're ready, begin to read now. Okay, your time's up. So now please let's listen to the lecture a professor gave with regard to this topic.
According to your textbook, the Aboriginal people are very diverse, and I would agree with that. However, there are certain beliefs that unite the groups, and in fact, allow them to identify themselves and others as members of the diverse Aboriginal societies. For one thing, unlike the anthropologists who believe that tribes arrived in eastern Australia from Tasmania about 40,000 years ago, the Aboriginal people believe that they have always been in Australia and that they have sprung from the land. Evidence for this resides in the oral history that has been recorded in stories and passed down for at least 50 generations. This history is referred to as the dreaming. The stories teach moral and spiritual values and provide each member of the group with an identity that reflects the landscape where the person's mother first becomes aware of the unborn baby, or, to put it in terms of the dreaming, where the spirit enters the mother's body. So, I am saying that the way that the Aboriginal people identify themselves and each other, even across groups, is by their membership in the oral history that they share.
Wonderful, that's it. So now I'm going to, again, signal your chronometer here. So please be ready to, okay, in this case, I'm going to choose the one who's going to begin. Okay, because you're the first person that I see, Marinas, you're going to be the first one. So please be ready in order to respond, okay? So let's go. Timer, remind, the same time. In order to prepare your response, 30 seconds. In order to deliver it, 1 minute or 60 seconds, okay? So please, every single one of you begin to prepare your response following the structure. I'm going to let you see the structure one more time before we get into the preparation. Remind, this is the structure, okay? In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, you mentioned whatever, in this case, the passage was about. Likewise, in the listening passage, you mentioned what the professor said generally, and you move on to say the first lecture's point, second lecture's point, and if there are more, you include them, okay? That is the structure. So now, please begin to prepare your response now. All right, your time's up. So please, Marinas, be ready and begin to deliver your response now.
In the reading passage, we have been immersed in the topic of Aboriginal Australian people. They share with us that there are many groups in this land that could be very different from each other and very, in so many ways, like in language, dressing, also the way they look. It's very different from one to another. Likewise, in the listening passage, they talk to us about how they came here. Anthropologists believe that they came from other lands, but they think that they have always been in Australia, and that's the story they share from 50 generations past. And also they share that.
All right, thank you, Marinas. It was a very good response, by the way. Thank you very much. So the next one is going to be Miguel Angel Silva. Please have your microphone ready and begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. I didn't have the time to organize well my sentences, and I'm not sure if I can do it now.
Oh, yeah, don't worry, it's fine, Miguel. You're gonna be the last one there, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Don't worry. Bonnie, please, your next one. Have your microphone ready, and please begin to deliver your response now. Bonnie, are you there?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
here.
don't worry. It's fine, it's fine. Okay, so begin to deliver your response now. You have your microphone off. Far away. Bonnie.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. Okay, so begin to deliver your response, please, now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people. This term is difficult to establish accurately since these people have a lot of difference from each other. The professor further elaborates on this. First, they established that they have always been, sorry, they have been supported by their histories who passed through the years and through the generations. And the only way to be identified as a member of these Aboriginal people is to be identified as a membership through the oral history.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Bonnie. Okay, so let's go. Next one, it's gonna be Carlos. Please be ready and begin to deliver your response now.
In the written passage, we've been immersed into the topic of the Aboriginal people that were living in Africa, that they have differences and that they differentiate from each other by physical characteristics, culture, and language. And likewise, in the listening passage, it talks about and how there are many groups that they live in this land, but also the anthropologist thinks that they came from another land from for over 15 generations, that they've been supported by history and has membership for their own group.
Right. Wonderful, Carlos. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so next one, please, is going to be Carolina. Carolina, please have your microphone on and begin to deliver your response now.
Teacher, I didn't listen the audio. Sorry.
Oh yeah, you didn't listen? Okay, that's fine. Don't worry. So we're going to let it to the end, okay? And help you with that. Okay, so next one, Jessica, please. Gutierrez, you're gonna be the next one. Please be ready and begin to deliver your response now.
Well, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people, specifically about the inhabitants of Australia, and because it's difficult to identify what the Aboriginal people, because exists different characteristic, culture, language, and different attributes about these people, and about the lifestyles is reflected in different groups and exist to different areas, and that's all.
Correct. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jessica. So please, next one's gonna be Laura Choque. Please be ready and begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, don't worry.
In the
Don't worry.
in the reading
Let's
passage.
begin again. Let's
Okay,
begin
okay.
again so that you have
Thank
your entire time. Yeah, don't worry. So begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal person and all the characteristics, the way they live, where are even the language of them. And likewise, in the listening passage, Aboriginal people are described as a diverse group with different cultures, and also that they didn't actually came from Australia, and from 15 generations. Um, I finished. I'm sorry. That's all.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Laura. It's okay. Don't worry. Just let me see here. Okay, wonderful. So next one is going to be Claudia. Please, Claudia, turn on your microphone and please begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people. There are many groups that have distinctive characteristics like the language, the physical characteristics, the location, but none of these characteristics attributes them the title of Aboriginal people. Likewise, the professor explains that anthropologists believe that Aboriginal people came from other lands many years ago, but probably the only thing that makes these people part of the Aboriginals is to be present in the oral history. That's what I have.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Very good, Claudia. Thank you. Okay, and finally, Alvaro Miranda, before we come back to Alvaro, please be ready and begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. In the reading passage mentioned about the Aboriginal people in Australia, there are many differences in culture, language, and physical characteristics. Further, these Aboriginal people established in many parts of Australia. Likewise, in the listening passage, the person says that Aboriginal people is diverse and their identity reflects over the years. That is all, teacher.
All right, wonderful, Alvaro. Thank you very much. Okay, and finally, there was somebody else, right, who said Miguel Angel Silva, please.
Okay.
So please be ready and begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of Aboriginal people. It's not easy to classify them or to identify them because there are many things that distinguish each one, like the language, culture, and other attributes. Likewise, in the listening passage, anthropologists try to state things about this topic, and they say that there are many groups that have been living through many generations, and that had been mixed from Australia, and they have been like more than 50 generations through all the history, and that's it.
All right, thank you very much, Miguel. Wonderful. Okay, so very good, students, very good. Okay, so for example, something that surprised me is that any of you mentioned something like the dreaming, you know, that the part that the lecture was about. I mean, the lecture or the professor mentioned something like the dreaming, which is how they code, right, the specific oral tradition they have in order to explain their origin, right, that they spread out of the earth, and they did not come from Europe or from Africa, but they spread out of the earth, and that is the way they explain their origins, right? That was, I think, a very important point made by the lecture. I think you should have definitely included that into the response. Okay, but it's okay. I mean, sometimes we notice some details, other people notice other ones. But yeah, I mean, try to always pay attention. For example, in this case, this matter of the dreaming, the professor, I noticed that the professor talked about this like a lot, like a long time. I mean, the professor stayed on this topic for a while. I noticed that he commented on how I said that, for example, there is some sort of metaphor with this specific tradition that the Australian people is our this aboriginal people have in order to explain their origin, that they believe this was something like the earth itself was their mother, and this mother, you know, conceived this child, and they were her child. I mean, it's very interesting, right? But yeah, that metaphor was also mentioned in the lecture, but nevertheless very good. Generally, for example, Bonnie, very good. Remind, supported. They were supported by people. That specific word, but very good response. Marina's equally very good. Anthropologists, that you were struggling a little bit with that word, anthropologists, but very good. Carlos, very good. Jessica, attributes, very good. I mean, that word, please have it in mind, but very good. Laura, very good too. Claudia, distinct, not distincted, distinct people, distinct cultures, distinct traces, let's say. Alvaro, but very good response. Alvaro, very good too. My own observation for Alvaro would be that it was too short, I think. There are a lot of information in this two materials. In the reading, there's a lot, in the lecture, a lot. So try to include more. I know that you're capable, that's very easily noticeable. So you are actually very much encouraged to include more information. So you talked about more things you have listened and you have written down. Even if you have not written down those specific things you want to talk about, if you remind them, talk about them with your own words. It's not necessary to reply. This is for all of you, your students. If you believe some sort of terminology, it's too complicated for you to replicate and to mention in your response, it's okay if you use any other term or word you are acquainted with. For example, if you don't know how to say, I don't know, like Aboriginal people, right? Maybe that term, it's a little bit complicated for you. You could say just the indigenous people, or the people who live out of the city, or the people who are living in rural areas. I mean, try to always find another way to say exactly the same in order to avoid using this super scientific terminology, right? The same, for example, if you struggle with anthropologists, that word, people who study anthropology, I mean, right? It's valid. I mean, if you forget how to say one word, or you're not that comfortable with pronouncing it, it's valid if you change it with your own words. It's completely okay. That's fine. Okay, so now I want to make sure that you have understood. Maybe you have any question? Any question? No more questions? Any observations, any commentaries about whatever we have said to this point?
Teacher, can you please provide us a website where we can find this similar topics?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's difficult to provide you with a website because neither myself am able to find one. I would like to have it like a resource that is open and free to everybody, but sadly it's not. Here at Executive English, we have like a Mangush account, you know, that the one that we use right when we are practicing in our personal sessions. But nevertheless, that has a password. Of course, I cannot share it with you. But nevertheless, I am going to right now. If you actually pay attention, this video right now here, the one that we have been using, I edited myself because I was using here my Premiere Pro program, and I found those specific materials in some websites, and I tried to unite them. I use here my program, so I'm going to let you have this video. Although I think it's too heavy, nevertheless, I have a list with the YouTube videos where I found this specific material that I'm going to share with you. Okay, so wait on the WhatsApp group. I have a list, a PDF list that I prepared with a lot of YouTube videos that have this specific material, as you can see here. For example, this one has a lot of videos with regard to that. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to let you have this search on it. All right, wonderful. So any other question, any other remark before we get into the well, so please, as you know, it's our tradition, reply to this poll, please. You know, it's anonymous. Please be very honest. We're going to also, I'm going to call your assistants, so please pay attention to the list. Stop sharing this.
I have a question, please.
Yeah, wonderful. Please.
In the summary, previous numbers or dates should not be given as an instruction to that you told us yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, yes. I mean, if there is some numbers, some dates, some, you know, some specific event, for example, or some specific name that is mentioned, it's not necessary to include it in your response, because those details, if you pay attention to them, and if you, for example, write them down on your sheet of paper, you're going to waste time right from that moment. And when you're trying to replicate that specific name or date in your response, I always notice that when people try to include that in their responses, they always struggle with it because they are trying to read it directly from their paper. So apart from that, I think it's a fact that the reviewer is not looking for how well you can memorize things, okay? Because this is not an exam about your IQ. They are not trying to know how intelligent you are in order to remind things. They're simply trying to know if you are able to measure or to synthesize the information you receive. That is to say, how good you can remind the general ideas and to expand a little bit on them. So it's not really necessary to remind specific days, specific names. Of course, if you want to include them, go ahead. It's not going to negatively affect it, but you can definitely pay more attention and emphasize on order, general ideas, and to expand more in them. That is my response.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. So, okay, so please listen to your name, Caballero Carlos Lopez.
No, teacher, I'm here.
All right, wonderful. Maria Fernanda Rivero, so here, no. Oh, yes, no. Marines?
Here, teacher.
Wonderful, thank you. What about Carolina Condicilla?
Hi, teacher.
Okay, wonderful. What about Yandira Lisette? No, not here. Ugarte Boni Daira?
Here.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, let's see. What about Alexandra Rita Montaño? Sit here. No. Tania Andrea Gutierrez? No. Pablo Martín? Okay, no. I think I'm calling actually the wrong one. Yeah. Sergio Mauricio? No. What about Lauria Letizia Mamani? Leticia Mamani, sorry.
Present.
No. Oh yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Álvaro Choyapa Miranda.
Here, teacher.
Wonderful. Thank you. Gutierrez Jessica.
Here, teacher.
Wonderful. Silva Plata Miguel Ángel.
Here, teacher.
Wonderful. Thank you. And finally, Patricia Jennifer Guzman.
Present.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, students, for your presence. Thank you very much for your responses too. And see you tomorrow in order to practice. We have a lot to practice tomorrow. Okay, so thank you very much and see you tomorrow.
Thanks to you, teacher. Bye-bye.
Bye, teacher.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
teacher.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Teacher.
Bye.